I know that so many people, when they do have these experiences and they experience this setback, they'll often get discouraged. So do you have any tips of how to think about these setbacks, how to kind of work through these issues? Because a lot of times it's kind of draining on the mental health side of things, where you're just like, oh, here I am again. I thought I was getting better and now I'm not. And am I going to be like this forever? So just maybe provide some tips or guidance on how people can just think about that. I know it's a big topic, but maybe if you just start, we can try to unwrap it a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, first of all, just normalize the fact that it's hard. It's discouraging to try and do things and have a setback, or to become worried about it or anxious about trying things again. That's really a part of going through concussion, and learning that, hey, I do need to dip my toe into the hot water in order to get somewhere, but it's really unpleasant. I think from the work I do in psychotherapy, there's a lot of strategies to kind of help people to build up that tolerance and say, hey, how do I work with the anxiety, the panic that comes up when I try to do these things? And again, focusing on those gradual steps that are going to set you up for success. I think my biggest piece of advice is, if you're someone who feels that you're here and wants to get back here, and you're constantly aiming for that goal to get back here, that's going to add to your suffering. It's going to add to your anxiety. It's going to add to your panic. It's going to add to your depression. So if there's a way to sort of negotiate with yourself and say, hey, this isn't where I want to be, but if I set myself a new goal or a new normal just within the range where you are, starting where you are, that's actually going to help me in the long run to gradually build up
Yeah,
over time.
I think that's something, especially when you have people that are high achievers, academics, athletes, you name it. Anybody that has that drive is going to look at this as being completely devastating. And I think that's something to kind of keep in mind and conceptualize of, don't try to run the marathon tomorrow, even if you used to be a marathon runner, right? You haven't trained in a few months, so you have to kind of build back up again. I think that's something to consider. So let's see if we have any questions over here, unless you have anything else you want to add on any of this stuff.
I was just gonna add to that and say, you can even just name for yourself when you notice you're doing that comparison, when you're trying to get back to the way you used to be. You can even just say the word comparison, name it, let yourself know what you're doing, bring some awareness to those patterns that might be keeping you in an unhelpful place. The more you get to know the patterns that you're in, the more likely you can set yourself up for those success experiences.
Mm-hmm. There was somebody in the program the other day that said that basically she had done everything that we had recommended before. I'm not sure if you remember this comment, but she said that she's like, before I joined this program, she said, I looked at the outline and was like, well, I've done diet, I've done meditation, I've done this, I've done that, like, I don't know what this is going to do. But she said the big thing that resonated for her was us saying, slow it down and like build on the concepts, and don't move on until you've completely mastered a particular element. Because, for example, the very first kind of module, educational piece, is you talking about your mindset, and you are going to have setbacks. And so framing somebody's mind around this idea that this is completely normal in the recovery from any injury, you're going to have periods of time where things flare up, where things get a little bit worse, but how you work through that, and whether you completely fall apart or whether or not you have the resiliency to kind of pull yourself up by the bootstraps and continue, that's going to make the difference between continuing on when things get hard, right? So I mean, that comment just resonated completely with what you're saying, is that she said, when I made the decision and the promise to myself that I was going to stay and figure this piece out and really have the tools in my tool belt to be able to use it when I need it, when things got hard. I mean, that's a huge element of recovery.
And I think that's such tough part too for people to wrap their head around, is everyone's looking for the quick fix. How do I get back to normal? I just want to go back to the life I used to live. Tell me how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people will scan through all sorts of material and do all sorts of treatments without really slowing down to understand what their unique situation is. What are your
Mm-hmm.
unique needs? How can you support yourself? What are some of the things that you can do to work through the struggles you're facing? That can be such a hard concept for people to embrace is this, hey, I can't just jump back to normal. I think I start the module in the recovery mindset for the concussion fix by saying the best way out is always through, right? It's a
Mm,
Robert Frost quote.
mm,
And people hate it. They're like, I hate that. Why do I
mm.
have to do that? That's
Yeah,
awful.
yeah,
I don't want to go through the muck. Just
yeah,
give me any way that I can jump over it, go underneath it,
right,
swim
yeah,
across it. You know,
yeah,
they'll, there's any list, laundry list of ways that you can get around it people want. And that makes so much sense. And I'm not trying to poo-poo that. I think it's just a really normal human reaction to pain and suffering. Nobody wants that.
no.
But in terms of coming back from something more chronic, you do need to go back to the basics and say, hey, I need to learn about myself. I need to understand my nervous system. I need to understand the triggers so that I can move forward slowly and gradually and build that foundation back.
There's two things that came to mind when you were saying that. Um, the one is that people looking for the quick fix often are just taking the long road, because as you keep looking for it's the same thing as get rich quick schemes, right? If you think about it from an investing standpoint, who are the best investors? The ones who invest in the long term, right? They find the things that are going to be successful in the long term. They're not going to be sexy because they're going to earn you just a steady 10 to 15% a year, which is a great return, and over time that will build significant wealth. The people who end up losing everything are the people that are going for all the little inside tips and, put money here and there and investing in these penny stocks that are, expected to be the next big thing. And they just end up chasing everything around, but losing everything in the process. And so it's the same kind of concept when people come in, and they'll ask me this too. They'll want to join the program and say, look, I want to join the program, but I notice that there's all this other stuff, but I think it's my neck. And so can I just get the neck piece? And I'm always like, no. The reason is because the neck is the last thing on the list, right? It's important. And a lot of times that is the key, but you have to build the foundation. So the second part of what I was going to say is that you guys don't know this yet. I'm going to send it out. I'll forward it to you and Paul, but I built this pyramid. It's like just a way to visualize this idea. And so there's three kind of structures on the pyramid. And at the lower base, I have the mindset idea, right? Nervous system, hypersensitivity, mindset, stress reduction, meditation, like building the tools that you're going to need to be able to go through the rest of this process. That's the foundation. That's the key piece at the bottom. Then in the middle, I have inflammation, diet, gut health, etc. And then at the very tip is the rehab, right? So the entire idea of rehab, but what do people do? Oh, it's my eyes. I'm going to vision rehab, but they haven't done the other stuff. So the vision rehab is not going to be helpful because they have also a neck issue because they have chronic inflammation, and they have chronic inflammation and they have so much neck tension because they're constantly stressed and nervous system jacked up. So you can do all the rehab therapy you want. So if you've ever been going through vestibular therapy, vision therapy, neck treatment, whatever, and you're not getting better, the reason is because you likely haven't built that foundation. So you need to kind of go back to the basics. And actually, by doing that, by taking the quote unquote long road, that's actually the shortest path that you could possibly be on, because otherwise you're just going to be chasing the quick fix forever and losing everything, and mostly time.
Yeah. You
And
might get the instant gratification. You might get that, oh, I'm better for a little while. But in the
right,
long term, if you haven't built your foundation, you're more likely to have a setback. It's like building a house without putting a foundation in. What's going to happen
exactly.
over time? It's
It's
going
going
to
to
fall
sink in.
apart.
It's going to sink into the mud.
Yeah.
It's going to
Absolutely.
sink.
It's such a hard concept to
I
wrap your
know.
head around. And I
I
think,
know.
I want to extend so much compassion to anyone who's listening, because it is a real thing. Of course, you want the quick fix. Of course, you just want to get back to normal. And I think that's a lot of the work I do too, is just looking at, hey, there's grieving. There's a grieving process that comes with the losses that you might have sustained on your way back to getting to where you'd like to be. And the more you can honor that, the more you can honor the pain that you're feeling, the more likely it is that you might be able to create some movement forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's a bunch of people commenting now, which is
Okay.
good. I know you only have about 10 minutes, so we'll try to see what we can get to. But
Sure. We can push the question.
Nicole says that's the hardest lesson to learn. Slow it down! Exclamation mark. Lucia says, love this live. Thank you. Um, Leanne says, is consistent exercise a foolproof way to regulate a hyperactive nervous system? I would say there's more to it than that. I think that, consistent exercise is going to help, particularly because it helps to balance the sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system, but there's way more to it, right? Like we were talking about breathing exercises, meditation, stress reduction. There's even some stuff on cold water therapy and cold water showers and things like that that can elevate your parasympathetic system. So I think there's more to it than just the exercise. Here's one for you. Carson says, do you have any tips for when you are flooded with stress and anxiety, such as meditation or mindfulness? Any tips for being flooded with stress and anxiety? What can you do?
That makes me think about the sympathetic nervous system, right? If we're constantly in that fight or flight mode, that probably sounds kind of what he's describing there. What can you do to bring yourself back into that parasympathetic rest or digest state? Because that's where healing takes place. That's where we can actually physiologically, emotionally, mentally recover. So like the gentleman said, there's things like mindfulness, meditation, strategies in psychotherapy, things that can sort of help to calm down that nervous system, to learn that you're safe in your body, is going to help reduce the amount of times your nervous system goes into overdrive, goes into fight or flight mode, and you're more likely to start recovering quickly in that parasympathetic or rest and digest state. To get there, I can throw out these terms like mindfulness and meditation, but they're whole practices, and they're, it's a process to kind of learn and understand them. For those of you who aren't in the Concussion Fix, where we kind of get into detail about that, there's some great, public apps out there like Calm and Headspace that can teach you the basics. Those are two really well-respected ones. And have done a great job. There's even themes in both of those apps around working with pain or injury or setbacks. So I welcome you to check those out as well.
Yeah, that's good. Do you recommend people, like in that state, do you recommend that they find somebody to work with? Or would you recommend they start with something like an app or something like that? Or would you say, you know what, if you're constantly in this state, maybe it would be helpful for you to, find somebody to work with, psychologist, psychotherapist,
Yeah.
social worker.
I mean, if you're finding that you've tried a few things and you can't seem to help some of the symptoms you're facing, and it seems to be this chronic state where you're feeling really discouraged and hopeless about it, absolutely get some support, have someone help walk you through it. If you're sort of just on the start of that journey, you might want to set some really reasonable goals for yourself and say, hey, I just need to learn about what is mindfulness, or I need to try listening to an audio track, and start building yourself up again, focusing on building success experiences. That's more likely to help you start building that foundation for recovery. But if you do find you're struggling more often than not, and you're feeling really discouraged or self-critical, I definitely recommend reaching out and finding a therapist or a community worker, or someone that can really help support you through that, even just to get started.
Mm-hmm. So this here is actually Marike, who's in the Concussion Fix. She said, this is a very helpful talk, Melinda and Cam. For me, it's hard because I've lost so much: work, sports, social engagement, driving a car, reading a book. So the steps from here to a little bit up, they're so small, and it's hard to keep trust and motivation. She said, luckily I found Concussion Fix, and this is a great live to add to my trust in the future. So yeah, I think that's something, it is almost like a loss, right? Like you can't necessarily socialize with friends. I mean, obviously pandemic world right now that, a lot of us aren't able to socialize with friends other than Zoom calls and stuff. But I find that concussion is just so isolating for people. And I feel that it is hard. And when you try to go out and do it, you end up with this nervous system that just won't let you do it. And now the discouragement is there. So I think that there's some really important nuggets here for people that have been listening to this, as to say, don't make the goal necessarily to go out with your friends this weekend for drinks. Make the goal to, make that goal, let's say for a month from now, or 6 weeks from now, and then do the things in the short term to be able to build up to get to that point. right? Like I think that's where we're missing is all the steps in between. We're saying, I want to go for drinks this Friday. I'm going to try it. And then boom, it doesn't work. And then now, it comes flooding in.
Spirals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, sometimes, yeah, just to comment on that, Cam, sometimes it's just starting for today. What are 3 things you're doing today? And once you've done those 3 things, that's great. That's enough. Close the book, relax, and then start fresh tomorrow. What are the 3 things you could do that day? Make them reasonable, make them, things that are going to help you move forward, but not overwhelming. And, sometimes when the future looks overwhelming and too much, don't think about the future right now. Just think about today. And then when tomorrow comes, that's today. And then when tomorrow comes, that's today. And just live in today for a while until you might feel more capable of making plans and taking things on in the future.
I think that's a great spot to leave off. So again, I know there's some things that we weren't able to get to, but Melinda has to go, and I actually just had a meeting note pop up. So apparently, I have a hard stop at 3 as well that I completely forgot about. So anyway, Melinda, you can find her at Still Space. For those of you that have persistent concussion symptoms and want to have some of these strategies, you can always check out the Concussion Fix, which is our program at concussiondoc.io. Anything else?
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. We so appreciate the comments. And I think it really helps us, whether it's the podcast, whether it's the IG Live, whether it's the Concussion Fix. The more we hear from you, the more we learn, and the more we can tailor things to what you're looking for. So
I
thank
agree.
you
Yeah,
to our audience.
I definitely agree. And if you guys have any other topics you want me to cover in future podcasts, feel free to send me a DM on Instagram, comment on the YouTube, or yeah, I think that'll be a good way to do it. All right,
Awesome.
Melinda, thanks a lot. Enjoy
Thank
the rest
you.
of the day, and thank you everybody else. Enjoy the rest of your days and weeks, and I'll see you next week for another episode.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.